What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Combat Sports Media YouTube channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury. I'm going to give you guys a little preview, breakdown, and prediction on that upcoming fight. But before I go any further, I would just like to say thank you to everybody tuning in. And please subscribe if you already haven't done so, especially if you enjoy my content. And let's get on with the topic. Let's start with Jake Paul first. Now, Jake Paul, I like what he's doing in the sport of boxing. Every fight that he signed up for up until this point has been looked at as a competitive and intriguing fight going into the fight. Now, hindsight is always 20/20. He's blown a lot of these guys out with ease. But going into the fight, they were all looked at as intriguing and competitive matchups. Going back to his fight with the basketball player, his fight with Ben Askren, now we could look at it as a mismatch, but keeping it real, beforehand, everybody was looking at it as an intriguing fight. A lot of people were saying, oh, Ben Askren's a real fighter. This and that. He's gonna beat Jake Paul because Jake Paul, even though he's been doing boxing for a few years, he's not a real fighter. Ben Askren has wins over a lot of solid guys like Robbie Lawler, and people just couldn't imagine and fathom a guy with a win over Robbie Lawler could lose to a guy like Jake Paul, who was better known as a YouTuber at the time and an ex-Disney Channel kid or whatever. But, I like it. And the truth is, all his opponents, for example, Tyron Woodley, I don't know, let's say that was his third or fourth professional boxing match, right? For Jake Paul. So Woodley is, unless if your favorite fighter is Lomachenko, Tyron Woodley is a better opponent than your favorite fighter's third professional opponent or fourth professional opponent, whatever the fuck Woodley was for Jake. That's just the truth. And forget about a guy like Anderson Silva. I mean, Anderson Silva is a better opponent than any one of your favorite fighters' fifth or sixth professional opponent. That's just the truth. Of course, unless your favorite fighter is Lomachenko. Because Lomachenko started fighting world-class fighters right out the gate. I believe he fought Gary Russell in like his third or second pro fight. And he's been at that level ever since. He doesn't take tune-up fights. He doesn't take showcase fights. He didn't have 20 showcase fights before he fought Gary Russell. But Gary Russell had 20 showcase fights before he fought Lomachenko. You know what I'm saying? Which is like the typical thing for modern day boxer, Because let's face it, most boxers retire nowadays with only fighting like 3, 2, or 4 or 5 real fights in their whole career. The rest are all showcase fights, build-up fights, and tune-up fights. Unless, of course, it's Lomachenko. Every fight's a real fight when it comes to Lomachenko. And Manny Pacquiao, he retired though, he's out the game. But that's another guy where every fight was a real fight. Again, most fighters fight 20 fake fights before they fight their first real fight. We call them building up your record fights. And then, of course, if they lose that one real fight they have, after they've already had 20 fake fights, they have at least 1 or 2 tune-up fights after that, and then they fight another real fight And then if they win or lose that, they'll still get another. If they lose, they'll get a tune-up fight, and if they win, they'll just get a showcase fight. You know. So back to Jake Paul. Every fight has been a real fight thus far, because going into the fight, we looked at it as a 50-50, or at least an intriguing matchup that either guy could win. Again, even going back to the Ben Askren fight, it was looked at as an intriguing fight. A lot of people were picking Askren to win. So yeah, Anderson Silva was his last fight. That's a phenomenal win. I mean, Anderson Silva is a better opponent than any one of your favorite fighters' sixth or fifth opponent. For some fighters, never even fight the level fighter of Anderson Silva. I mean, Anderson Silva was coming off of a win against Chavez Jr., who obviously was never that good and was way past his best, but nevertheless, that's something that should have never happened, and it did. And you got to give Anderson credit for that win. And Jake Paul was able to get the win off of him, even though, keeping it real, I thought he lost. Mind you, I was watching the fight with no commentary at like a restaurant or something. After the fight was over, even after the knockdown, I believe that it was a close competitive fight that Anderson Silva won. And when it was close but clear to me. And when I saw that Jake won, I was like, oh man, this is bullshit. And I just forgot about boxing for like a few days after that. But anyway, whatever. Regardless, I don't really care. I mean, I care because it sucks for Anderson, and I don't support wrongdoings. But as it pertains to this conversation, that's still a great notch under Jake's belt, regardless if you think he won or not. Because, and mind you, I know I'm in the minority. I haven't really heard too much backlash in the boxing community about the decision. So I'm well aware of the fact that I'm in the minority. And I'm in a minority about a lot of things, so I mean, that doesn't bother me. But the point I'm trying to say or make is, regardless of what I think about the result, I still think that was great for Jake Paul. That was a great notch under his belt as far as experience is concerned, and even performance. Because even though I thought he lost, for a guy that's only been boxing for 3 years to perform like that against Anderson Silva, I think was great. I mean, he went the full distance and got the knockdown in the last round against Anderson Silva, and he performed good regardless of me thinking he lost a close fight. So for a guy with his experience level, that answered a lot of questions about Jake Paul, about his heart, his conditioning, and his skills, as well as experience-wise. That was very good for him. It's going to benefit him in the future, and in the very near future. I think very highly of Jake Paul. I expect him to eventually win a world title in the sport of boxing if he so chooses to continue. And I always thought that. I said this after he knocked out Ben Askren. I said that Jake Paul, if he pursues this, he will win a world title if he wants. Because the potential is there, and the dedication is there, and the resources are there. That's what I think of Jake Paul. Now moving on to Tommy Fury. I'm not as familiar with him, as I'm sure that's the case with a lot of people outside of the UK. But from what I've seen, look, this is an excellent matchup, all right? Just like all other Jake Paul matches going in. And this looks like a really intriguing fight because Tommy Fury, as we all know, has grown up. He's not new to boxing. He's grown up in the sport of boxing. He's the half brother of heavyweight champion Tyson Fury, and you know, watching him train and fight, you could tell right away that he's the more fluid fighter out of the two when it comes to Jake Paul and Tommy Fury. Tommy Fury is by far, you can tell it, he's been boxing longer. Right away. He's more fluid. Jake Paul is very talented and he's very good for the amount of time that he's been boxing, but you could tell right away when you compare the two, when they fight or when they're training, that the more fluid fighter is Tommy Fury, and that comes with experience and the amount of time that he's been doing it. But I'm not saying he's the better fighter. Now, he's only had like 8 fights, so very similar record as far as the number of fights to Jake. But the level of opposition, regardless of him being a real boxer, you can't compare it to Jake Paul's level of opposition. Anderson Silva is by far, forget about Anderson Silva. Tyron Woodley is better than anybody Fury has fought thus far in his career, with the exception of maybe his last opponent. So Jake Paul, similar number of professional fights, but Jake Paul definitely has fought the better competition by far. So Jake Paul is actually more proven in the pro game than Tommy Fury is at this point, without a question. However, Tommy Fury has been doing this for a longer time, has been training specifically boxing for a longer time, and to my knowledge has had somewhat of an amateur career. And even though he hasn't had a lot of amateur fights, he's been in the gym for a very long time, and you can tell right off the bat when you watch the two of them train. So, and look, just a little bit about Tommy's style. Again, I haven't seen too much of him, but from what I see, is he actually puts combinations together pretty well, and he has a good uppercut, and he uses it a lot. It's one of his favorite. It might be his favorite power punch. He throws good uppercuts, even from like distance. And again, he throws good combinations, like 3-punch, 4-punch combinations. Very fluid, decent hand speed. He looks strong, but we're gonna see how strong he really is when he fights Jake Paul. And Jake Paul, he's got that big right hand. He's kind of gangly, not very fluid, but he could put anybody out with that right hand when he touches them. And so far, he's been fighting guys that he's been able to touch no problem. So if Jake Paul touches you, he's got like a 90% chance of beating you in a fight. He's got that one-hitter quitter. That's real. But again, not the most experienced or fluid fighter. But he's explosive, powerful, and a little bit athletic. Now with Tommy, let's move on to the prediction. Now with Tommy, the thing is, I do think at this point, it's very possible that he could be the better fighter. But he has to knock, this is my opinion, he has to knock Jake Paul out to win this fight. And he may be capable of that, and maybe he will even get a knockdown for all I know in this fight. but I don't see him sleeping Jake Paul, and I think that's what he has to do to win. If Jake Paul goes the distance, even if he gets outboxed every round, I think he'll get the decision. Like I said, look, I like what Jake Paul is doing. I think very highly of him. I think he's going to win a world title at one point if he chooses to continue with the sport. But I do think he lost the Anderson Silva fight, and that's not a knock on him. That's still a great performance by him. Having a close competitive fight with Anderson Silva at this point in your career, that's a great result, regardless if you won or not. But even if this is a prediction, so I have to factor these things in, and in my opinion, even if Tommy deserves to get the win on the scorecards, and maybe even gets a knockdown, he's not going to win this fight. He has to put Jake Paul out. And I don't think Jake Paul is going to go out. And if he gets floored really hard, I expect Jake Paul to get up, because I believe that he's a determined guy on a mission right now. You have to kill Jake Paul right now in order for him to not. And he's not going to give up. Jake Paul at this point in his career is not going to give up. He's too hungry. So I just don't see Tommy Fury putting his lights out, and for that reason, I expect Jake Paul to get the decision. That's simple. So there you have it, folks. Thank you for tuning in once again. Hopefully I'll see you guys soon. Peace.